GamingBolt presents 15 things only amateur gamers will understand. Amateur gamers are an interesting phenomenon. It's not just because they lack information that others with more playtime would have. It's also definitely not because they're only into simpler or more casual experiences. No, amateur gamers are interesting because many of the things they do are also done by more experienced players, whether out of habit or instinct. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of those things here. Constantly reloading. What do amateur players and veterans have in common, especially when it comes to first-person shooters? If you answered reloading after firing a few bullets, you're correct. We don't know what it is, obsession, compulsion, habit, but we just need to have a full magazine at all times. Curse developers who put so much attention into reloading animations as well, it only makes the process that much more addictive. Map knowledge. The term amateur player doesn't just have to apply to someone who's bad or new to a game. It could also apply to someone who's yet to fully understand a game's map. Knowing where health packs in Overwatch or power ammo in Destiny 2 can spawn makes a huge difference. Also, take PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds or Fortnite. In these games, knowing the best locations with the best possible loot and gear drops is important. Knowing when to hit those areas is also paramount to winning at times. Dropping into populated areas. Then again, newish players in Battle Royale titles tend to drop in a location that's usually crowded. Maybe you really want to fight some dudes and dudettes like Fortnite's Tilted Towers before it was destroyed again and again. Perhaps you have some Battle Pass challenges to complete in that location. Either way, even if success is dictated by how long you survive and gather gear, there is something exhilarating about falling from the sky and taking on all comers, then dying because it was a bad idea. Running and gunning in tactical shooters. We're not saying that running and gunning isn't a thing in Rainbow Six Siege. We're just saying that, more often than not, it's not the best idea. Heck, tune into the most ranked matches, and it's a squad carefully moving through corridors and camping a single spot, waiting for any movement from the enemy, or at least that's what Twitch taught me. Trying to run around and kill a properly coordinated team, especially with accuracy being affected by movement and recoil, is probably an invitation to die. Running and gunning solo. That being said, straight up running into the enemy team and trying to gun them down doesn't work in any number of shooters that emphasize teamwork. We're not even talking about flanking, but even that can spell disaster if your team isn't around to follow up. So when you have a hand cannon and a dream in Destiny 2, or want to smack these so-called noobs in Overwatch, just don't feed and it'll be fine. Going guns blazing in stealth missions. To further add to that, even if you're playing a stealth mission, whether solo or with friends, going guns blazing is a definite no-no. That's because, well, numerous reinforcements, the general squishiness of your character, complete mission failure, etc. Some games are more forgiving when it comes to failing stealth like Spider-Man, or allow for a mix of styles like Dishonored. That being said, sneakiness for most new players takes less precedence over going Rambo. Ignoring objectives in missions. In the case of stealth games like Hitman 2016 or Dishonored, some players tend to just ignore the objectives and go on a murdering spree, which, hey, it's your game, do what you like. An argument could be made for no witnesses, but both of the above games tend to penalize you for wanton killing. Regardless, the mission isn't getting done anytime soon, so focusing up and controlling your bloodlust is probably a good idea. Speaking of ignoring the objective. Ignoring objectives in multiplayer. C9 lol. How many times have you heard this? Probably too many, especially in Overwatch where everything is a C9, also known as getting off of the objective during overtime or carelessly ignoring the point, giving the opposing team an advantage. However, you don't have to play a competitive game to see people ignoring the objective. Once again, they could be new or they could just not care about the objective and simply want kills. Either way, amateurs, the lot of you. Choosing characters for their looks. When Overwatch first came out, everyone wanted to play Genji. Not because he was stupidly effective, which he was before Papa Jeff got his Nerf bat, but also because he was a cyborg ninja. A cyborg ninja! Who's going to say no to that, much less using a Dragon Spirit-infused katana as an ultimate? Now, forget that most people didn't know how to use Genji, or that this trend of choosing characters for the looks is still a thing and you'll be fine, except in ranked modes for any hero-based shooter or MOBA. You're probably not going to be fine then. Choosing weapons for their looks. However, we also have a related trend in action games like Monster Hunter World, Bloodborne, and Dark Souls, choosing a weapon for its looks. I like how the Rook Slayer longsword in Monster Hunter World looks, but it's not nearly the most effective weapon. Same goes for the Decimation Claws. There are just better options for dual blades despite how sick these look. This trend is even worse in Dark Souls and Bloodborne, where stats determine just how effective a weapon will be. So while the Fume Ultra Greatsword in Dark Souls 3 may look sick, it won't be much use if you poured most of your points into dexterity. Bum rushing bosses in Souls-like games. Games like Dark Souls, Bloodborne, and Nioh typically ask you to study a boss's patterns and strike at the right time. Nevertheless, throw an amateur player into these situations and they'll probably rush headlong into a boss, striking with everything they've got. Suffice it to say, without knowing what the boss will do and when, this strategy fails more often than not. Ignoring movement abilities. Movement abilities in games like Sunset Overdrive and Spider-Man can be incredibly valuable. Besides being intricately woven into the gameplay, they can make the difference between feeling powerful and wobbling about helpless. And honestly, we don't blame most amateur players for not exploiting movement possibilities right off the bat, especially if they're conditioned to stay on the ground in most third-person shooters. It's just one of those things you need to learn and take advantage of. Taking quests when underleveled. Look at games like Destiny 2 or The Division, and you'll often see players attempting boss fights and/or missions while being underleveled. They're not crazy, they just crave a challenge, having mastered the key mechanics over time. Other players simply take on missions that are out of their level range because, well, they don't know any better. The consequence can differ depending on the game, but if you don't know what you're doing in Assassin's Creed Origins while being several levels below the enemy, you are in for a world of hurt. Mashing buttons in fighting games. New players in fighting games tend to learn the moves for their character, getting a feel for the controls beforehand. However, anyone who's anyone has resorted to the most powerful tactics on occasion, namely mashing buttons and hoping for the best. Most times, it works, and it's kind of fun. Other times, experienced players wipe the floor with us. It's the effort that counts, really. Ignoring the endgame. Less of a criticism and more of an observation is the fact that most amateur players tend to drop endgame-centric games after completing the story. So they simply kill Diablo and Mithail in Diablo 3 without ever going into the greater rifts. Equivalent Destiny 2 players will probably do a few missions in Forsaken's The Dreaming City and never bother with higher level activities like the Shattered Throne or The Last Wish. There are tons of different examples like Middle-earth, Shadow of War's Shadow Wars, Torchlight 2's Mapworks, and so on, but the reasons could range from lack of time and not having friends for group content to just not being interested in a longer-term grind. At least they got out, unlike some of us addicts. And that about does it for this video. If you enjoyed what you watched and want to see more from GamingBolt, you can always hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon next to it. That way you will never miss any of our videos.